Yo, BJ GADDOUR with the BJ GADDOUR Podcast. And today is a glorious day. I have, people have asked me over the years, like, who are your influences? And when I was in Amherst College, 2003, 2004, I started training professors, students, sold my first $100 program, and I was searching the dark webs. This is like the big bang of fitness online. I found a bunch of names, not a bunch, but a handful. Guys like Joe DeFranco, Louis Simmons, influences on my guest as well. But then I found this product. It was called Magnificent Mobility. And you know that I am a slut for alliteration. And this was a product. It was a DVD. I don't know if people listening that are younger, a DVD is actually a disc you would put into a DVD player and watch films. They don't exist anymore, but they'll be very popular in 20 years as the old becomes new. But it was a mobility product with a man named Mike Robertson and Eric Cressy. And I've been following Mike Roberts, both those gentlemen, particularly Mike, who's on the show today, for ever since. What struck me in the product was the professionalism, the attention to detail. And, Mike is a trainer to trainers, a pro's pro, one of the best coaches I've ever watched or experienced in this space. And we have him on as a guest today. Not only am I so excited to have him on a guest at the podcast today, but we made content together back in the day that I am going to be publishing for the first time ever at the TDBJ.com, which includes express and extended warm-ups. We're going to be talking about mobility versus massage versus activation. We're going to be talking about bulletproofing the knees, the back, the shoulders. We'll also be talking about his beginner bootcamp program, a 4 to 6 week, 3-time-a-week workout program you can start doing today to get back in shape, and then even some advanced content. We'll talk about Mike as a creator. So all this will be coming through to you at the dailybj.com site and app, free 7-day trial. So I welcome to the show the capital T-H-E-E Mike Roberts. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, brother. Thanks for having me, man. It's an honor to be on.
Well, look, I was just on your podcast, and I don't know how long that was. Was that 5 hours?
Yeah, it was 2. It was 2. But my podcast guy, it was enough for him to say, wow, this is a longer show. I said, yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. By the way, I had at least 2 to 4 plus more hours in me. This will be a 1 hour. Mike is so busy. So this is going to be 1 hour. We're going to keep it tight. But we're going to basically be picking the brain of one of the most experienced people in the fitness space. And by the way, I mentioned how I first came upon Mike's content, and I basically had the opportunity to pay Mike to produce this content that we're talking about today. And he's going to talk about it, more of the overarching themes, because, we're both over 40. We both work with a lot of people that are approaching and or are over 40. So these are just topics that are top of mind. The concept of really, you were the guy that people might not realize this, but the term corrective exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It might have been used before, but you were the guy, in my opinion, that has popularized that. And it's basically getting people out of pain, fixing a lot of the movement problems that happen through sedentary lifestyle. So you want to talk about that? I mean, the concept of corrective exercise and how you first kind of came upon that term or this philosophy.
Yeah, man, it really started in 2003. I was working in this rehabilitation facility, right? I came in and I thought, man, I'm going to be training like healthy people, and I'm going to be training these athletes and making them jacked and super strong and athletic. And man, rehab facility, it's knee pain, back pain, shoulder pain. So my days are surrounded by these people that are, I don't want to say dysfunctional, right? I hate that term, but they're not moving well. They're in pain. And then when I'm not training them, I'm training myself, and I'm super into powerlifting. But if you look at powerlifting as a whole, everybody's broken. So I'm trying to take a step back and just think, well, what are some of the commonalities here? And most importantly, there are certain ways the body is meant to move, right? There are certain things that we're supposed to be able to do. We should be able to squat and hinge and split squat and do push-ups and all these things. And there should be a movement model underneath those. So before I knew what a movement model was, I just knew a squat should look a certain way, a deadlift should look a certain way. And if it doesn't, how can I make my clients or athletes get a little bit closer to that movement model? And lo and behold, when people started moving better and we started to get some of these things cleaned up, they started feeling better. So that was kind of the whole impetus behind this. It was twofold. It's one, I want these people that I'm working with, even though I don't consider myself a rehab specialist or rehab performance type person, I knew if I'm going to train these people, I want them to get results. And on the flip side, for me, selfishly, it's like I love to powerlift. Everybody around me in my ecosystem at that time was powerlifting. So how can we help broken people feel better? How can we help powerlifters not get broken and stay strong? That was the impetus behind all of this, just trying to help people move and feel better.
I love it, man. And again, I think trainers or coaches listening, you got to find a way to properly market and brand yourself, your programs, your workouts. And that's really the difficult aspect of a lot of this, because rehab isn't sexy. And in fact, a lot of people, I was just talking about this in a recent episode, people, they think rehab or rehab style of movements or PT is just for people that are injured.
Right.
And obviously there's this concept of prehab, which means proactively addressing some of these issues, which could be kind of blanketed into corrective exercise. But look, man, you made rehab sexy. Okay.
Tried to, man.
You did. And here's a true or false question. Mike Robertson, true or false? Mike Robertson is a generous lover.
True.
I knew it. Look, the attention.
I'm a giver, man. I'm a giver.
It's the patience and the attention to detail.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so, this whole term, in my opinion, I think it revolutionized people's approach. Because again, there was always this gap between trainer or coach and physical therapist. And, you have to be careful with scope of practice. But ultimately, people aren't coming to physical therapists to lose fat, gain strength. And we have to do what we have to do to get them ready to pursue those goals. Absolutely. So, in my opinion, you really were at the forefront of bridging that gap, and I applaud you for it. And again, if you're not following Mike on YouTube, if you're not listening to his physical preparation podcast, I have to question what's wrong with you. And I have links in the show notes. So you've got to follow this guy.
Do better, man. Come on, do better.
You got to support people that are leaders at the forefront of this, that do it the right way. And Mike is that dude. So I want to talk about your powerlifting background. Let's talk about some of the numbers you achieved, the people you work with in the powerlifting space. And then I want to parlay that into your work now with professional basketball and soccer players, or as they call it, football, the beautiful game. Let's start with the powerlifting piece, because, man, you put up some numbers, but you also know firsthand, and not only in your own experience, but working with guys that squatted, deadlift 1,000+ pounds and under the West Side Barbell umbrella of Louis Simmons, rest in peace. Yeah. Let's talk about that, because it's a lot of people now are like, they're 40 and like the hip, the knee, the shoulder, the back. Wow. Like it's come at a cost.
Yes. Yes. So I got into powerlifting originally as a vehicle for my own self-confidence, right? Just being totally transparent, at 22 years old, when you step into a collegiate athletic weight room, which is where my first internship was at Ball State, I was not a confident coach, right? And all of us have issues with confidence in coaching early on. For me, it was just my own physical strength, right? I hadn't spent enough time under a bar. So for me, powerlifting was an opportunity to really dive in and firsthand, how do you get stronger squatting, bench pressing, and deadlifting? Because if I'm going to tell other people how to do it, it just made sense to me. I should know how to do it. It made sense. I should have a certain level of proficiency. And by extension, if I'm doing those things, then I think ultimately it's going to make me a better coach. So that kind of got me into the sport. What really hooked me was I was an athlete my whole life, man. I played everything. And this is in the late 80s, 90s. We didn't have anything else to do, right? There's no internet. I had an 8-bit Nintendo. Big time when I got that 16-bit Sega Genesis, right? Sonic the Hedgehog was a whole nother level. But you just didn't have as many things indoors to do. So you want to go outside, you want to do stuff. So powerlifting for me was a way to continue my competitive endeavors without the need for a team, right? Because you get older, you can't necessarily organize so much of this stuff. So now I get to merge. I love working out. Right. I've got the innate competitive drive of an athlete, and it allows me to merge those two things into a sport. So absolutely loved it. Right. And I competed for 5 years, best lifts, a 535 squat, 335 bench, 545 dead. So the big thing for me was the deadlift. Right. I love deadlifting. It was like my last meet. I got a 3X bodyweight deadlift, because I actually went down to a 181 and did that. So I was pretty proud of that. That was pretty cool. Felt like I had more in the tank, but also dude, the competitiveness of my work life took over, right? Like I love my job. I love working with athletes. I love growing our gym. So that kind of took things over from there. But one of the cool things was when I was getting into powerlifting, I read guys like Louis Simmons, like Dave Tate. You know, I went over to West Side and I got to train with them. So it really came full circle. I believe it was in either 2009, 2010, Dave Tate asked me to come on board and be a contributor to the EFS site. So for about 3 years, for free, I answered legitimately thousands, if not tens of thousands of Q&A questions, you know, kind of under the rehab performance corrective exercise umbrella. Helped out there. I went over numerous times and worked with the guys, tried to help them. I mean, look, dude, if you bench press 600 pounds, your shoulders are taking a beating. If you're squatting 900, 1,000, 1,100 pounds, your hips, your knees, they're taking a beating. So just being able to go over, work with these guys, try and disseminate some of the things that I'd learned over the course of my powerlifting career, and then just translate to them, right? Because look, I was mediocre at best. Like a normal person hears those numbers and they're like, wow, he's strong. And then you get into powerlifting and you realize, no, I'm actually very weak compared to like the best of the best. So it was great because I enjoyed the sport. I thrived and loved training. Ultimately, I loved training more than I did the competition side just because I love to work out. But for me, it was being able to go in and help these guys that are truly world-class. It's like, okay, how do we turn this dial 1 degree, right? How do you help that guy that's stuck at 950 because his hips are broken and get him to 1,000-pound squat? Like that's what got my competitive juices going as a coach as well. So it's been pretty cool, man. Like it's been a full journey and powerlifting did a lot for me. And I hope people that listen to me talk now, like I try not to ever disparage powerlifting, but I do try and just explain like, look, that was a certain time in my life. It was amazing. I loved it. I've kind of moved on and evolved. That doesn't mean I take anything away from that time or that sport. It's just like all people, like I evolved and now I'm more in this. Hey dude, I got 2 kids, right? I got a 12 and a 10-year-old. So I want to be in great shape. I want to be around as long as I can for them. I love being able to go out and kick a soccer ball with my daughter or throw baseballs with my son. So it's like all of us, right? We all go through this natural evolution. So powerlifting was amazing for me, but also now I'm where a lot of us bros that are 35, 40 plus are living. It's like, hey man, I want to look good, feel good, and live as long as I can now.
Yeah, man. You look, it's not, and like, people that know me and listen to this show know that I started in my pursuits of football through powerlifting to get big and strong and dominate the field. And the main point here is, number one, there is a cost to any extreme pursuit.
For sure.
Which means, by the way, any competitive outlet or sport.
Yeah.
Big cost. It's, you know, for a marathon runner, it's all the impact and the repetition. For someone who's pursuing strength, it is like this extreme load coming through the joints. For a court field athlete, it's all that multi-directional change direction, right? So
yeah,
and long-term impact. So the second point is you do have to evolve what you do. It doesn't make you a weak person or less of a person. Evolution is part of life in and out of the gym, and the person that doesn't evolve over the years, you know, that's not a good thing, man. Not to disparage someone who likes to do the same thing they did since they were in their teens. But I think what Mike's pointing on is, again, it's not about bashing. It's about just, you know, powerlifting is not for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all we're trying to say here. And again, it's and those guys also, I think one of the sad parts of it, and you see this, not only powerlifting, bodybuilding, and the reality is too, there's a lot of drugs involved. There's a lot of crazy weight manipulation involved to hit these weight classes. You know, what about the life after?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
No one thinks about that. So, and that's what, you know, our specialty is for a lot of, you know, broken people. How do we get them back in? Or, you know, what's the next pursuit after athletics? Because you got to find a way to get that competitive release.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And for me, I don't know, I've always found I'm a competitive person by nature. So we could go in here and get on Mario Kart and do some work, you know, like that's just the kind of person I am. But man, I've just got so many other areas that I can also be competitive with myself, right? Like now it's like, hey, can I be more competitive in my conditioning endeavors? Because we know that's kind of important as we age. Can I be competitive in aspects of my business with my friends and other people, or just with myself, right? It's part of it too, is less comparisonitis and looking at the world around us versus, hey man, like I just created a really good video. So like celebrate that video and like, hey, that was really good work and people resonated with that. So I think that's part of it too, is like less trying to compare yourself to the rest of the world and just like, hey, am I moving myself forward? And that's probably a little bit deep for the show, but you know, I think something everybody needs to focus more on.
Well, look, man, Mario Kart is very low impact. So that's
Mario
always
Kart's incredibly low impact.
And then, you know, again, whatever, there are just these commonalities with a successful person and successful endeavors. And that translates again in and out of the gym. You're using your same process.
Yes.
Used in powerlifting and coaching. You're taking that to content creation, to your family, to the home, you know? So now you, like, I know you do a wide variety of work in your gym and you got to keep the lights on and do a lot of general fitness. I know that's not also your passion. You're working with a lot of NBA and pro soccer players now. And, you know, we're going to be touching on, you know, the bulletproof component, but in those sports in particular, you know, I've heard you talk about this on your physical preparation podcast, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen, be sure to tune into that, especially if you're a coach. But the knee and the ankle.
Oh, yeah.
Are the areas of biggest concern, right, for these athletes?
For sure. Yeah, it really comes down to, if you're not adding some dedicated time into these areas, you're probably going to have issues. It's not a matter of if, but when. So yeah, with basically every guy and gal that we have walk through our doors, their ankles are stiff. It's a performance enhancer to a degree. And this is one of the things that I think people get confused by, right? It's like a medicine, right? A certain amount of a medicine is helpful. Too much of that medicine now becomes poison. Yes. And so that's how a lot of these things work, right? Like, do you want ankle stiffness in a basketball player or a soccer player? Yes, absolutely. It's performance enhancing to a point. When that ankle doesn't bend anymore and now you can't absorb and distribute force effectively, now that stiff ankle becomes a knee problem, right? So that's one of the like ways I always try and explain this to my athletes is everything that we're doing, there's a give and a take. And with most endeavors, there's a performance enhancing element. And then there's a, okay, now you've taken your superpower too far. Right. It would be like if Superman couldn't control his laser eyes, right? And then he becomes the guy from The Boys. If you've ever watched that show where he's just
Homelander.
Yes.
That guy is so good at that role. What a
He's a savage. He's a savage. But then you go from, hey, I'm using this to open this door to, I just lasered this guy's head. Right. So we try and give them these analogies. And look, everybody wants to be told you're a superhero, right? Everybody wants to be told they have superpowers, except look, if you play in the NBA, you really do. Like you have an elite ability to change directions or to jump incredibly high. So we just try and explain to them, look, all of these things that make you great are valuable. I don't want to take those away from you. I just need to keep them in check so they don't come at a cost, right? Or we minimize that cost. And like you alluded to, even if you play in the NBA, man, if you're running up and down a court 25, 30 minutes a night for 10, 15 years, there's a cost. But generally, you're willing to accept that based on the amount of money that you make.
For sure. And again, you've worked with Roy Hibbert. You're based in Indiana, by the way, for those listening, a fellow Midwest guy. I'm from Milwaukee, obviously, those that know me. But, you know, Roy Hibbert, you want to talk about some of the top athletes you've worked with, soccer, basketball, also teams. You do team conditioning as well for the whole team.
Yeah, man, I bounced all around, dude. I mean, I've literally had people from the NBA. Obviously, Roy was a big one. Glenn Robinson, the third.
Big dog's son.
Big dog's son, yes. What's really cool is I've trained his son, right, Glenn, and he won, before he worked with me, unfortunately, won the dunk contest. So that's pretty sick. But yeah, he's like a 7-year NBA vet. He's making kind of a comeback now. I actually trained his son, his other son, Jalen, who's even more interesting in some respects because he played like AAF and XFL football.
Wow.
So he played that for 2 years, was kind of on the cusp of making an NFL team, but then those two leagues folded. So he went and converted and he played professional rugby. He'd never picked up rugby in his entire life, played for an entire year professionally. Imagine how hard that would be, right? And then went back last year and played in the XFL. So I worked with him. Obviously, you know, a handful of, you know, guys that are like kind of, I don't want it always sounds bad, right? But like, you know, minimum contract level guys in the NBA, great human beings. And then in the soccer space, I spent like 10 or 11 years very high level soccer. We worked with our professional team here, the Indy 11. I worked with a guy named Chad Marshall, who was a 3-time MLS Defender of the Year. So he's pretty darn good at stopping people from scoring goals. You know, Brad Evans, a girl named Lori Lindsay, who played for the U.S. women's national team. Like, pretty lucky, man. Like, I've got to work with some really high-level athletes. And the one thing that I found is interesting, maybe it's just the fact that they're willing to come hang out in Indiana or Indianapolis for an off season and work out. But, man, everybody I've had come through my doors, just amazing human beings. Like, amazing human beings.
Well, they were lucky to find you, man. Again, you know, location is everything when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And it's, you know, it's tough to compete with the athletic performance enhancement groups, you know, in Texas, Florida, California.
Yep.
But, you know, when you're good at what you do, people will come, especially if they're close.
Yep.
So let's get into, you know, some of the content you made, and also, you know, describing some terminology and just identifying key movements that are essential to these protocols. You know, one thing we did in making the content was we wanted to create both an express and an extended warm-up, you know, 5 and 10 minutes respectively. And by the way, extended warm-ups can be as long as 20 to 30 plus minutes.
Sure.
Which I'm a huge fan of for my own personal training.
Yep.
Because I know that the best warm-ups result in the best workouts. But for the average person, a busy parent, professional, executive, whatever, you know, the concept of warming up for just 20 to 30 minutes is just beyond the pale.
Yeah.
So let's talk about like what you would put in a 5 versus a 10-minute warm-up to mostly benefit or give a maximum effective dose for the average person.
Yeah. So, well, this is a great kind of just overview, because like you alluded to, if I've got somebody coming in and I maybe only have 45 minutes to an hour with them, they're not going to take 30 minutes to warm up, right? But I always tell people, regardless of what we're going to do today and how much time we have, we're always going to warm up, right? So in those short express type warm-ups, what we're really going to focus on are just big bang compound activities, right? And not in the sense of like squatting, benching, deadlifting, but like, hey, what are some mobility activities that will hit multiple joints, go through, you know, big ranges of motion, so we get the most bang for our buck? This is where I always think about there's practical and there's optimal, right? Everybody wants to talk about optimal. I live in the real world, man. 23 years of coaching people. I'm all about practical. So if I've got 5 minutes, we're going to do 5 minutes of the best activities, right? Focusing on like those big ball and socket joints, the shoulders, the hips, right? Making sure the knees and the hips are unlocked. We're going to hone in on those. And then if we got 10 minutes, now we just have more time, right? And so the way I think about it is, instead of just going like straight to the big bang stuff, we'll just start with lower level activities first, right? Maybe we have time to do some really isolated joint mobilities for very targeted areas, right? Like maybe just the ankles, just the knees, just the hips. And then we can get into the big bang compound stuff. So it really just depends on, hey, how much time do you have with somebody? And again, just being a realist, like you can't be that guy that's like, oh, you got a 30-minute workout, we're going to take the first 10 and warm up, right? Like that sounds great on paper, but nobody in the real world wants to do that. They're there and they know, hey, I got 30 minutes. So at best, you can take 5 minutes to work them out and get them to warm up. So, but you mentioned one thing, and I think it's great to mention here too, is this idea of extended warm-ups. There's lots of ways I sneak movement into extended warm-ups, so people feel like it's part of the training session, right? Like dragging sleds, pushing a prowler, you know, throwing medicine balls, just ways that you can make it feel like it's not just a warm-up, but it's part of their actual workout. And I think if you can find little ways to trick people, it sounds sketchy and shady. I promise it's not. You're just really trying to make sure that they're getting the most out of that training session. So it's just ways that you can merge different elements of the workout to get an even better training effect.
100%, man. And again, you know, it's the concept of built-in warm-up. You know, a really stellar programmer knows how to package that in while people are actually working out. It's happening.
Yes.
You know, whether they realize it or not. And that's the skill that not a lot of practitioners have. You know, and again, what I always tell people too, you know, you can use these express extended warm-ups. And again, what Mike goes after here are the 3 most commonly tight areas for the average person. These are general approaches, right?
Yep.
Nothing wrong with general. General is where sometimes you got to start and you can specify and individualize off of that. But it's really the ankles, the hips, the thoracic spine, or upper back. And Mike does a great job in these routines of setting that stage. These are the areas that, again, when you're short on time, you always want to show them a little love pre-workout. But then on the off days, instead of trying to, destroy yourself with more, high intensity intervals or, another full body workout, just do multiple circuits of an extended warm up. So that, that way, not only are you getting the recovery, but it's making it so you don't have to warm up as much, where a 5 or 10 minute warm up actually works for you because you're not so tight and stiff.
Absolutely. Like, I think one of the best off day workouts, and I feel like you and I have talked about this a bunch now. It's like, hey, don't just like train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever days it is. Don't just go hard on those days and then just go chill zone the rest of the week, right? Like, if you can do anything on your off days, if you just do like a little mobility circuit and go for a walk on your off days, not only does it help keep your body comp in check, but your mobility is better, your body feels better. It's like just those little things, because I always use like the 100-year rule as a litmus test, right? This won't work forever. But 100 years ago, you couldn't just sit around and play Mario Kart all day, as much as it would have been awesome, right? No, you had to like get up and you had to walk to school or work in the fields or walk, like you just had to move more. And I think if we can tap back into that and, hey man, go hard on your training days, I'm cool with that. But then find ways to intersperse movement on your off days. I think it just makes your entire life that much easier.
100% on that as well. And again, video game listeners, TV listeners, again, I talk about this all the time with the, the Netflix and stretch programs I've made in the past. You can stretch while watching TV. You're playing a video game between games, or whenever you fail or die, or between races and Mario Kart. Just hit a 1 or 2 minute mobility drill. Some of the stuff that is shown in these videos. Just drip it and pepper it in throughout the day to get great results. And again, one thing that I'll also point on too, I think we've kind of had an ass backwards approach with how people start training. They start working out, then they're supposed to find time for mobility recovery, warming up. Whereas really what most people need is just to start with warm-ups. And you bake that into your brain and your body. And now you have not only the best way to start a higher level workout. And again, that's the thing too, is you want to establish a habit. It can't start being hard. It's got to be easy. So you actually look forward to doing it. You want to do it. And then you have that skill, that habituation in place. Now you can add something else. Now getting into more specifics, you have a bulletproof, your knees, back / lower back, and shoulders. Each of these are 10-minute circuits you can follow along to. But now this is where you get into specifics. You go through a general warm-up and you say, wow, this person's ankle mobility is trash. All due respect. Ankles. But like when you know that the ankles are tight, it's almost always going to be something the knees are going to take some beating on, because you can't get those bends. Running, jumping, walking, squatting. So let's talk about how you kind of structured these 3 routines: knee, back, shoulder, and what are the most important things to focus on for each, quickly, not about, we could talk about each of these for a full hour.
Sure, for sure. So when I'm thinking ankle mobility, one of the big things that I'm going to try and do, number one, is unlock the foot and the calf, right? Foot and the calf almost always are in a bad position. So, I mean, it can start as simple as either a tennis ball, if you got one laying around, or a lacrosse ball. Start getting on that thing, roll out the sole of your foot, roll out your calf, your Achilles, your soleus muscles. That alone could just like get you in the ball game, right? So many people I work with, kid I work with today, literally, he's got, he's really into running. And so I had him start getting on that. He's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how tight this is, right? So unlock those areas and then start working the mobility on the top, right? Recapturing that dorsiflexion. And something you talked about actually on my podcast was flipping those, the slant boards around.
Game
right?
changer.
And driving that ankle mobility on top of that, because I think once you recapture that dorsiflexion at the ankle, and then it's tibial internal rotation, right? Once you unlock the ankle, the tibia, you can start getting the knee over the toe. It's not about being like Gumby here, right? But getting enough ankle motion to where you can distribute those forces, immediately the knees feel better, right? So that's where I'd start with ankles. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. But then you can start peppering and layering that into your squat, right? Because a good squat should have good ankle motion, right? So start to unpack it with the isolated stuff and then move into the integrated movements, right? Ankles, pretty straightforward. When it comes to the back, right, and the hips and all of that area of the body, I'm really looking at the pelvis, because so many people that I work with that have back stuff, their pelvis is not in the right position. Either it's dumped really far forward, right? So we would call it a big anterior pelvic tilt, right? Or a big lordosis. You could just say, oh, that person has a big curve in their back and their hips are pointed down towards the ground. So for these types of people, I'm really trying to restore that position, right? Breathing is actually one of the easiest ways you can do this. Lay on your back, bend your knees, put your feet flat on the floor, breathe, right? But the breathing is important. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. Engage those abs as a starting point, and then use your hamstrings to get the hips back underneath you. So the abs pull up on the front of your pelvis, the hamstrings pull down on the back, and it helps level things out. So once you start to build that foundation, now you can add in glute bridging or things of that nature, or like single leg hip thrusts, where you're just trying to get the glutes to work and fire a little bit more in conjunction, but you're starting with the right body position. And this is where a lot of people go wrong, right? They've got that big kind of arch in their back, their pelvis is dumped forward, and then they're trying to like extend their hips and they physically can't do it. So you got to start by getting in the right position. Then you maybe do your glute activation work, or that's when you throw in like your hip flexor stretching, because it all starts with the base and the foundation. Once you set the base and the foundation, then everything is easier. And then what was the third? Shoulders?
Yep, shoulders.
Yeah, shoulders, man. Like, unfortunately, for a lot of us dudes, we didn't do ourselves any services when we were younger, because we just like bench pressed and rode our shoulders into oblivion. So, man, again, this is where the lacrosse ball comes in. I'll roll my pecs, my lats, my rhomboids in between my shoulder blades. I'll just try and get some of those muscles to chill out and relax. Big believer in just like total body, thoracic, T-spine mobility, right? There's tons of ways you can do this. You can do just a rib roll where you're laying on your side, kind of grab your rib cage and just work on T-spine rotation. You can reach up towards the sky and do like PNF type activities. You can pop up and go into your half kneel, 2 for 1 here. Go into your half kneeling position. So you're stretching your quads, fingertips behind your head, or PVC pipe, and work on your T-spine rotation there. There's so many ways you can just layer this organically, either into your warm-up, into your workout, as like little mini mobility sessions on your off days. But yeah, those are the main things that I'm thinking about when somebody comes to me and they've got like ankle mobility, that's like knee stuff, back stuff, shoulder stuff. I'm trying to target some of those key areas and just get them moving more often.
I love that. And again, the beauty of these routines too is you do them, but you can also, you take the movements, any of these movements or movements that are specifically important or a priority for you. And if you're a traditional like straight set strength training person, now you have what they call fillers you can do between sets. So again, what you've got to do is, people can't typically add more time. They have X amount of time, and that's baked in. So what you have to do is you just can't sit there for 3 minutes and rest if you're short on time. You can do these drills. You can work on stretching your hip flexors or mobilizing your ankles between sets of squats to not only get that work in to preventing the knees from getting into pain or in bad positions, but to make the next set even better.
Absolutely.
So that's where you can also kind of take these drills beyond doing the routine, 10 minutes straight following along. So, one thing again that you've been heavy into in your career is, mobility, massage, mobility, and activation. We have individually a 10-minute mobility, 10-minute massage, 10-minute activation circuit that you can go through. Can you talk about just quickly, for the layman, so to speak, what each of these really means? People know of these terms now. I'm not really sure they fully understand what they mean and how they're different.
Yeah.
And then how you approach making a routine like this.
Yeah. This is a great question. And I think let's start with massage, because that can be very broad depending on how you're looking at it, what tools you have access to, right? So like there is actual massage, right? Where like if you go to a track and field event, right, they'll have like massage therapists on the side. The track coach will see somebody run and they're like, oh no, his calves are tight. And, Hans is over there like kneading the tissues and making sure everything's firing right. That's great. But most of us don't have access to that while we're training, right? So we have access to like foam rollers and that sort of thing. So I think this is a great tool to just widen our movement window, right? I think lots of people want to explain why they think it works. I've just given up on that. The way I describe it to people is, look, your quads are tight. I can tell you that definitively, because here's what's going to happen. You're going to roll on this quad and it's going to hurt like heck for 30 seconds while we do it. But when you stand up, you're going to have more motion through your knee joint and your knee's going to hurt less, right? So that's a very simple way that I can explain, hey, look, this foam roller has a place in our warm-up. It's generally the first thing that I do, right? It takes like no mental currency at all. Like just hop on here, roll around, because most people are coming from work. They're fresh out of bed, right? Or they've been dropped their kids off at school. So their brain is in a million other places. So we'll start with this just to start widening that movement window. Okay, so that's number one. Second is mobility. And this is where, hey, we're trying to recapture specific ranges of motion. And again, you target the joint, ankles, knees, hips. It can be isolated, like we talked about in our extended warm-up. It could be very focused and like global and like, hey, if we got 5 minutes, we're going to unlock your ankles, your hips, your T-spine and shoulders, and then we're going to get into this session. But mobility is really just trying to restore active range of motion through various joints in the body. And then the final piece is activation. And activation is really just trying to ensure that, hey, once we're in the right position, do we have the right muscles firing? So again, I keep using this idea of, big anterior tilt, big lumbar curve. If you set up or you present with that posture, like I do, right? Like it can be hard to combat. That's how my body is shaped. You're not going to extend your hips very well, right? So when I push and I squat or when I deadlift, it's very hard for me to engage my glutes. So maybe you want to work on activating those muscles, right? Reset the position, get into a better starting position. And now we want to repattern or reactivate these muscles in a very low threshold environment. It's not like you're trying to deadlift 500 pounds, right? You're laying on your back and trying to just rebuild that mind muscle connection. Can I get my glutes to fire when I perform a lift or an activity? So that's kind of how I delineate it or break these up.
I love that too. And part of what's amazing of these 3 routines too is that they flow together so beautifully, right? You want to actually start with some massage, break up some of that hypertonic tension in those muscles, which allows you to better mobilize. And when you mobilize a joint, it's more able to stretch and contract, so it activates better. So ideally, you flow these together. And, it's such an awesome way to look about allowing, again, this is where you get into performance enhancement. It's nowhere in this as we're talking about what weight you're using or how fast you're moving. It's just about getting the body in proper positions, taking away some of the restrictions that sedentary lifestyle have imposed upon your body, sitting, commuting, or getting back into shape or getting back into the quote unquote gym. So, that's what's also beautiful about these as well. And by the way, like you also might find too, it's really the activation that I'm missing, or it's more about just the massage. So again, whether all 3 are given equal attention, or you say, this is where I'm really tight or struggling, you focus on that routine.
Yep.
So beginner boot camp, and again, what I love about this and what we did is you created a classic ABC or a 1, 2, 3, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday split.
Yep.
And you can take the other routines and do them on off days to feed the main workouts. But what we wanted to do is create a minimal equipment, basics ground zero program. And again, people look at these things like it's for losers, or I'm too advanced for that. But the real pros know that you're never beyond the basics, and that, every year I like to return to the basics, because if you look at it from a building standpoint, both Mike and I build programs like an engineer.
Yeah.
And we look at the base, and the more you can come back to widening and fortifying that base, not only the bigger the building you can make, but it's going to be more resilient to wind forces, earthquakes, and, the stuff that comes up, injuries. So talk about how you, what do you consider basic foundational movements that build a workout? And again, the beauty of this too is the ABC over the course of a training week, because you can't cram it all into one session. I mean, you can, but it can be like, the way I put it too is the greater the number of exercises in a workout, you have X amount of focus. You have to spread that across all those movements. So it's better to make it, a shorter, especially earlier on in training. Advanced trainees, they can do a lot.
Yeah, sure.
30 plus movements, but 5 to 10 things or less that you can focus on, so each of them gets the proper attention. So talk about how you went about building your beginner boot camp.
Yeah. So, well, I'm going to talk about that, and then I want to talk about the person that thinks they're too advanced, because I think there's something to be said there too.
Love that.
So when it comes down to it, right? Squatting, hinging, or deadlifting, pressing, pulling, and you could talk horizontal, vertical press, split stance, single leg, shoulder accessory, hamstring isolation, like ball leg curl type activities. Man, when you start breaking it all out, there's easily 12 to 15 large groups, and then you can get even more nuanced and more narrow with those. So like you alluded to, if we want to give people variety, and most people that are in boot camps want a certain level of variety, right? You can't just have them squat Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because they're going to get bored. Yep. There's a reason they're not your standard like semi-private or private client, right? A lot of times they like the energy, they like a faster pace, they want more, I don't want to say randomness, but more variability in their programs. So that's something that I tried to deliver, right? Is how can we build good movement patterns? How can we expose them to a broad series of exercises across the training week while still building that foundation that you talked about? And I actually stole this from you, but when the person says, oh, I'm too advanced for that, right? Okay, well, maybe a plate reaching squat or a goblet squat isn't the most exciting squatting variation, right? But I stole this from you, right? You remember how we start with one variation and then we have 2 progressions and 2 regressions? Yeah. Like that's just baked into everything that we do. And like that was something that we always pushed when we were running our boot camps at our gym, is like, hey, when Betty is here for her first session and she hasn't trained in 10 years, she's going to do that plate reaching squat, right? Because it's almost fail safe, almost impossible for her to screw up. If she's been here really long and now she's crushing it, that's a goblet squat. Or if they're just absolutely killing it, it's a 2 kettlebell front squat, right? So it's like once you understand movement and you understand the concept of progression, regression, whether it's increasing load, complexity, hey man, these very basic workouts can be scaled up or down depending on the person in front of you. And I think that's the real value in this, is once you start to think in that fashion, it's not just exactly what I say on the paper. It's, oh, when he says squat, okay, that means squat pattern. What all fits under that umbrella, and how can I tier that up or down based on the person that I'm working with? Like that's how I think about it as a trainer or a coach.
And again, the basics, you can't skip them. And, the beauty of it too, and I was just finishing a FaceTime session with someone yesterday. I had been working with her for a couple of years, and, she's in the pursuit ultimately of the single arm push-up. But the reality is, some people are 5 to 10 weeks away from the single arm push-up. Some people are 5 to 10 years away. Yeah. But she can do a single arm push-up. We just have to get her to like 8 rings up on her Smith machine.
Right. Right.
And just elevation. Again, that can be mimicked with an aerobic step or within a door frame. And again, if you have a losing mindset, a focus on what you can't do mindset, yeah. You would say, well, I can't do it. No, you can. You just can't do it on the floor. Yeah. And that's okay, because we can, in the Smith machine, we can work you down a peg at a time. And it might take years, but if it's important to you to do that exercise, that's what it's going to take. And that's why, again, I think what we did in this plan, as you put it together, it's what can you do? And you pick movements that almost anyone can do, beginner through advanced. Yep. And again, advanced people can still use these in whether it be warm-up sets or back-off sets, or, they never are going to be things you'll get beyond. They can always be worked back into rotation or recovery periods, Yep. So it's a really intelligently designed program. And again, these are just, how do you put this to people in terms of, this is like the pass, shoot, dribble.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the foundation. It is the foundation of human movement. Right. And some people want to take it, maybe too far, but it's like, yeah, like these are the boxes I'm trying to check, whether I'm working with a Gen Pop client that just wants to move well, feel good, play with their kids or their grandkids, to high level athletes. Right. Like, yep. Now, granted, these guys probably have a little bit more output that we need to chase. There's more intensiveness. There's a higher bar to be set, but the foundational pieces of movement are the same regardless of who I'm working with.
Exactly. And again, what's so genius about this too, and we're both obsessed about this is trying to bake in auto correction, right? We know people are going to struggle with certain things on a squat, so we like to put them on a bench or box to sit onto to not only give them confidence, reduce impact forces, but, slowly retrain the pattern in a safe way, in a way in which it's almost impossible to do, badly or incorrectly whenever you can. So, that's a big part of it as well. So again, these programs are going to be in the dailybj.com site app. We could easily charge $99 for this, but it's part of membership, and you guys will have access to it. In finishing this, I want to just talk to you as a creator. We have people that, whether they're in the trainer, fitness coaching space, or just they're online creators, or just, you got to bring creativity to most jobs. What is, and you developed this over many years, what is your creation process? Do you have like a set of things you do to get ready to create, or how has that evolved over the years? It's an open question, right? But as a creator myself, I always like to hear about what it is that you do to bring out your most creative expressions.
Man, this is a great question, and I'm going to give you one piece of advice, and then I'll answer your question. Right? I think one of the best things I did for myself, because I am very science-brained, analytical, didn't do well in art, those types of classes, right? So one of the first things I had to do was get past this mindset of saying I'm not creative, right? Because, okay, maybe not in the sense of drawing a picture or painting a picture, right? I'm not creative in that sense, but as far as writing an article or coming up with a theme for a podcast or a video, okay, that's actually more of a skill set I can cultivate, right? So even if you're not an artist, or you don't think of yourself as a creative, you have to stop telling yourself that, right? Because I think all of us have this in ourselves. For me, I think one of the things that I'm always coming back to is I'm always looking for sources of inspiration when I'm training, right? So when I'm having a discussion with an athlete and they're like, man, why are my knees bothering me so bad today? Or, especially when new people are the best, because they are so forthright. Well, how come my knees have always hurt, and now when I work with you, my knees don't hurt anymore? All right. Or, oh, my shoulder used to always hurt, now my shoulder never hurts. What did we do? Those make some of the best pieces of content because it's so relatable, right? If somebody's willing to ask you that question, that means there is a burning audience that wants to hear the answer to that question. So then it really just comes down to, how are you going to package it in a way that people will want to consume it? And so one of the ways I used to think about this, and it took me a while to get around this too, because look, when I first started writing, it was 2003. I was writing for T Nation. I was 25 years old. I had no business writing for T Nation. I got really lucky, right? Shot my shot, created a couple good pieces of content. John Berardi vouched for me. So I got this amazing platform early on. But what I learned was, look, there's legitimately, we didn't even have the Google machine at the level we do now, but there's probably millions of articles about a squat back then. How many are there now? How many pieces of content are there about a squat right now? Nobody. You are not going to write a better article about a squat than Dave Tate or, one of these other genius level powerlifters. But what you can do is write a really entertaining article about a squat that talks about it through your lens and your experience. And I think that's what's most valuable. Now, here's one of the other things too. Unfortunately, friends, if you're 22, you don't have as much experience yet. So just know who you're talking to, right? If you're 22, don't tell a 42-year-old bodybuilder or powerlifter how you think they should squat, because you have no clue. But you could tell a 17-year-old that's never been in a weight room what it's like to get under the bar. And you're always talking, hopefully, to people that are a little bit below you or a rung down on the ladder, right? You're trying to educate the people one notch below you. And I think that's a great way to look at it, is you got to find your angle, take your unique experience, and fuse that into your creatives and your content. Because look, one thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed this as well, right? Because we've been around for a long time. We've seen a lot of content. When somebody's just rehashing somebody else's stuff, a young coach, I'll just dude, I know exactly who you're citing. I read that book too, or I watched that video as well. I don't want to know what they know because I already watched them. What do you know? What is different about you? How can you tell me how to squat or bench or deadlift or run faster that they're not going to tell me. Like, that's the secret sauce. And I think the best creatives out there find ways to take things that are fundamentally interesting to a lot of people and then package it in a real and authentic way based on their own unique experiences.
You know, I love that. There's a couple key things to unpack there. Number one is, you know, there's low level conversation / content. There's high level conversation content. You can call that beginner. You can call it advanced. You can call it starter. You can call it elite. But when you're making content, especially when you make content for a long time, you've got to be able to do both.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The real skilled practitioners or content creators, they know how to make low level content feel high level. And they also know how to make high level content accessible to lower levels.
Yes.
You know, like, this is aspirational. You can go here, right?
Yes.
And here are the stepping stones along the way. So, you know, that's why, like, we're in this stage now. You just talked about, like, people stealing or copying trainers before them. Again, we're all going to naturally do that. If you consume or learn, you know, at a subconscious level, you are internalizing the teachings. But again, you gotta make it your own.
Absolutely.
You can't just take the name of their program or, you know, all the exercise they did it and use it exact same way. You can just add your own signature style to it.
Yeah.
And that's also why in this AI age, because I did this, I shared this in a newsletter. I entered in ChatGPT, make me a BJ GADDOUR style workout that's 20 minutes using a Tabata interval timeline. And within a second, this populated something that like 99% of people would think would be a workout they would pay for.
Wow.
Now, my eyes looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, there's no artistry to this. And I think a lot of it is too with AI. AI is chasing perfection. And the reason that, you know, humans are artists is because there's inherent bias and imperfection into what we do. And we need to celebrate that.
Yep.
We're constantly chasing how to make things better. And that's what differentiates us. That's what makes you different from me, different from other people out there trying to do great things in the space. So I call it the physical arts. And a lot of people listening that are like, oh, this is the gym bro trying to make what he does, you know, better. I think for a long time, I've almost slandered what I do because I like to self-deprecate and, you know,
sure. Me too.
Same thing too. I don't want to take myself too seriously at the same time too. What is different in terms of what we're doing, you know, than a painting or making an album? I mean, it's not the same inputs, but it's a very similar process that goes into designing a workout, a program, or teaching people how to do things that are beyond their current level. And again, real recognized real. I see that in your program. And there's just a signature style. AI is certainly not going to be able to figure that out in the next 3 to 5 years, if ever.
Right.
What I'm saying,
right.
and to celebrate creators, and you got to support creators.
Absolutely.
Because you know that's the problem right now is people are going to go the route of low cost, copy and paste.
Yeah.
You know, steal, and that's always been there. But you got to keep being a patron, a supporter of content, the good quality, you know, real content out there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, man.
So can you tell these beautiful people where they can find out and learn more about you, and then any cool things on the horizon for you?
Yes. So I always tell people, look, depending on what you know about me, your level of familiarity, what you want to get out of our relationship, there's 2 places, right? If you want free stuff, you know nothing about me, you're just somebody that wants to look good, feel good, move better, go to robertsontrainingsystems.com. There's literally thousands of pieces of free content, articles, podcasts, videos. It's all there, right? All the social, all the YouTubes, that's all there. You can get all that for free. And I always tell people, look, I'm going to keep creating as long as I can, right? As long as I'm in business, I just enjoy it and I like helping people. So it's a very leveraged way for me to do that. So you can check out my stuff for free as long as I'm creating it at robertsontrainingsystems.com. If you are a trainer or coach, if you are not having the success that you'd like, you have the cert, but you are not getting the results that you would like, whether it's programming, coaching, any of that good stuff, go to completecoachcertification.com. It is basically my entire training system distilled down into a 20-hour self-paced online course. And I took a lot of time and effort and energy into creating that because, as you know, I created a lot of products over the years, right? I have no idea, somewhere in the order of 50 to 100 if we're talking individual collabs, one-offs, all that stuff, there's probably close to 100 pieces of content. But like 10 years ago, somebody was like, if I could only buy one thing that explains what you do, what would it be? And I didn't have an answer for them, right? Because I had magnificent mobility and bulletproof knees and all these things. So Complete Coach Cert is basically for those people that want to know what I do. They want to be able to take it, replicate it, take my systems and infuse it into what they're doing with their clients and athletes. So I think it's a pretty good investment on their part. So RobertsonTrainingSystems.com for free stuff, CompleteCoachCertification.com for trainers and coaches who want to level up.
Guys, you've been listening to one of the most prolific people in the space. I mean, again, if you just Google me, bitch. If you Google Mike Robertson, you see the number of articles this man has written. And again, I'm an old school classic man. I think it all starts with the ability to write if you want to do anything great in and out of this space.
Yeah.
And, you know, Mike is a triple threat type of dude. He can write, he can speak, he can film. And he also has his X factor in terms of how he approaches and does things. And he's changed the game. You know, Bulletproof, that was a, you know, you're one of the people that popularized bulletproofing programs. And now everyone out there is bulletproofing.
Yeah.
Which is good. But you know what? That's what you were out to do.
Yeah.
Now, whether you get credit for it or not, again, credit is for, honestly, credit is probably for the insecure.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you know what
I'm beyond that. Trust me.
Hey, you're beyond that. You're again, he's 40.
That's
40.
right. That's
you're 43, right.
A lot changes when you're 40, man.
Yeah, everything changes, and in a good way, and also in a bad way. But you know, you it's all balance. You know, again, I also you got to get on Mike's podcast, the Physical Preparation Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen. And you're also putting a lot of emphasis now into your YouTube channel. What I tell people on social media, the place to go if you really want to learn and connect, and also just it's so much better because everything else like TikTok, Instagram, everything dies.
So fleeting.
Within an hour after posting, it lives forever on YouTube. So you got to check out Mike's YouTube channel as well. Those are the two spots as a consumer, Mike's content I would go to right away. But we'll drop in your website. You also gave us for coaches, trainers, $200 off your complete coaching certification. We'll drop in that link as well. And again, if you are a member or not yet a member of the dailybj.com site and app, we're dropping in the content we've discussed today, which we could easily charge $99 for. That'd just be part of the membership for those listening. So Mike, man, thanks for the time. And you're royalty here. You're welcome on anytime something new is coming up. Because again, I'm sure like you have noticed too, it's tough to find quality guests.
Yeah. It's not as easy as it used to be because everybody and their brother has a podcast. And I respect that. Like, it's just like, if you remember blogs back in the day, everybody had a blog, right? Now everybody's got a podcast and it's like, okay, but there's a culling at a certain point, right? Because people get tired, right? There's podcast fatigue. So yeah, you got to make sure you're putting out quality content. And I mean, that's an evolution too. That could be a whole nother show, right? Yeah. Just, hey, start where you're at, but work to get a little bit better every time.
Look, we just spent an hour with you. We're both busy old men over 40. Okay. All I ask is, you know, the second it takes to just click 5 stars, you take your little beautiful finger, first kiss it, lick it, wet it, tap that 5-star. Now, if you want to go the extra mile and take 10 seconds to give a 5-star rating and review, the review can be as simple as BJ podcast good. 3 words. All I'm asking. I don't need a novella. I don't need prose. I don't need anything amazing. If you want to do that, great. But again, I think what people do is I'm going to wait to give the perfect review and they never find the time.
That's a great point.
I'm looking for like hundreds of BJ podcast good 5-star reviews. Take the time, check out the show notes to follow Mike. And again, TDBJ members, get into this content. I'm going to send it out right away when this publishes. You know, again, I'm trying to turn you on to one of my early influences and truly a pro's pro, someone that has absolutely, I mean, you changed the game 10 to 15 years ago and you're still in the game. So this is a real special guest and a real special contributor to the health fitness space, man. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks you, brother. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, we'll be back with more episodes. Be sure to check out the show notes, check out the content. Love you guys. Peace.